So, we've had like a lot of opportunities, Nedamasang, in terms of like this series to touch base on
Yeah,
local,
yeah.
international, whatever it might be, but
News.
we look at it from like a brand and like marketing perspective, strategic
Yeah,
perspective.
yeah.
So something that to again to put this in context
Put
to
it
sort of
put it into context.
to have an idea as to what we're talking about and what we're trying to get at is it's really something that
Yeah,
blew up over the past week or so and over the past weekend in
week.
terms of
Yeah,
weekend, yeah, about a weekend or
couple of weeks,
so,
I guess. Yeah,
in relation to two influences, something that we touched on in a previous episode also, but specifically in terms of Sri
yeah.
Lanka, someone who's transcending between the traditional media as well as like online scape. Um,
Now, yeah,
two people who are known in that space as
yeah,
well. And
yeah,
they came under a lot of backlash, a lot of controversy for
yeah,
technically something that is being considered in an international level, but
yeah.
specifically now in the current backdrop, in the
It's
current
just
context.
yeah. The recognition is there. I mean, you understand what it means.
Correct.
Yeah,
Today, which was in relation to the yays and nays, let's say, of blackface and the use of
yeah,
that. Essentially, we're
yeah.
talking about the Nakshi and Saranga's incident that that took place a week
Shanudri,
and a half ago.
Shanudri. I think.
No, Dinakshi and
No,
no,
Shanudri and Saranga.
no.
Shanudri because the teledrama
Yeah, that was
is
Shanudri. Yes,
Virupi is from Shanudri, and
correct.
but okay, you're going on about yeah
I'm going.
how they
Yeah, so how it came about
that's enough.
essentially. Okay, so what I'm trying to get at is this came about because of the backlash that
Yeah,
happened since
yeah,
how they seem tone deaf about the circumstance about blackface, and yeah,
yeah,
it's something that two of the family and the extended family members had gotten involved in on a professional level, right? In terms of a
yeah,
stage play, in terms of saranga, and
yeah.
in
Not
terms of a
personally.
teledrama
Yeah,
for Shanudri. But regardless, I think that I mean we've been looking at things in a much deeper level anyway for all of our episodes. So it's not really about that, but
that
rather
yeah,
about the greater perpetuation of fairness culture. Let's say the fairness complexion culture as it relates to media, as it relates to the
yeah,
world at large, and whether
yeah,
it is offensive in itself, whether people should be triggered by it, if not, why, and so on. And I think Shashin and I have not polar opposites, but we've been talking about this at different levels. And when it comes to the concept of blackface, um, I think the way we need to think about it is somewhat different to what most people essentially think of it should be as. But I think Masang, you need to get us rolling here because it's something I think you have more of a majority take on this than
Before
not.
before even we go about that, I just want to say that let's just. I think people kind of gave a bad rep for for the people who were involved with that, and I think they have a certain fault at the way that they handled it. But at the same time, I think people went full retard with the way that they handled it as well. Right? You have to understand if these people are doing a teledrama or a movie or a stage drama, whatever it is, and they did do something like that. Yes, they are at fault at a certain level to have not addressed it. But at the same time, you have to look at the creators because they would have come up and said, "Look, this is what you have to do, and this is the reason that we picked you." So I feel like there's a bigger responsibility and a and the hands the fingers has to be pointed towards the creatives who did those projects as well, that they elected and they decided that we need to go in this direction rather than actually in a much better direction. So as much as certain level of shame rather should go to those the celebrities, I think it should not be the full extent of it. Now coming into the bigger picture, right? And I think the way that the skin color, especially for a country like Sri Lanka, where the majority is considered brown, or rather we are a we are Asian country and we are considered to be brown people, and yet in our country, inside our own country, the perception of and how we treat fairer complexities and darker complexities are vastly different, right? And it stems from even our families itself, right? You meet your relatives, and they, if you happens to be a bit darker, and it's suddenly bad, and it goes towards entertainment industry and advertising, marketing as well, where and this is where I have personal experience. I consider myself to be fairly fair of an individual, and yet I used to be in commercials when I was young, and then I wasn't, because I guess I wasn't cute enough. But when I was
We'll try to track some of those down for reference for this video, by the way.
look, man, I tried to look at them on YouTube. It's not there to be seen, unfortunately. Every other commercial is there except for
We
this
have to
one.
take your word for it then, Masa. But okay, but no, I can vouch for that. So he was in.
Yeah, so
that's how he was
in a
known
bunch-
in school as well. But
So I was in a bunch of commercials, and each time I remember the production houses and the agencies that was part of it, they were looking for fair and Indian-looking people. This was the two distinguishers that they required, and each commercial that I went for, and the ones that I received, that the ones that I was a part of, and the ones that I wasn't part of, that I didn't get selected, the requirement for it was, we need a fair person and we need an Indian looking person. And at the time, even I was super young, and I was under the influence that, yeah, fair means beautiful, fair means better looking, and something positive is there on the other side of the equal sign of being fair, right? But as I grew, I understood that that is not the case, right? Just because you're fair doesn't mean that you are good looking or you're better looking or anything like that. So I feel like there's a huge misrepresentation of Sri Lanka as a country in our advertising system. Even you and I, maybe we have even considered that option, that route, without even knowing, because it was such a normality in our culture. Yeah.
I think there's two parts to that though, Masha. I agree in the context that the Sri Lankan media landscape has been formed with a lot of influence from Indian culture and Indian requisites. And I've said this quite a bit for quite some time. India and Sri Lanka are two beasts altogether, two animals completely different from one another. But for a long time, I think many advertisers and many media professionals tried to tag it that way, and you'd notice some of the older commercials, and even now to this modern day, you'll pretty much see, either for the purposes of cost cutting as well as justifying the fact that it's the same market or similar markets, they'll just bring in an Indian commercial, dub it in Sinhalese, and then run it on TV. And I think that's a worse way to go about it, because you're losing sensibilities when it comes to local culture.
100%.
But that's a broader problem. I think that stems beyond the whole complexion issue as such. But when it comes to the aspect of complexion in the context of good and bad, I think that association, that binary association that you're suggesting is correct. That has been the case perennially throughout time in terms of Sri Lanka, but I kind of see it differently. And I want to preface this by saying, because we had this conversation slightly before, and I want to preface it by saying that by no means am I suggesting, as I'm suggesting this now, by no means am I suggesting that complexion should be a deciding factor for anything. It should never be the case, right? It must go far much deeper than that, and you must decide on a person's capacity, capability, and competency in spite of the complexion or what you see. It must be based on what that person has done, and his actions should speak for him rather than what he or she looks like. But having said that, I also do feel that sometimes this argument on blackface, complexion, fair versus dark, is being pushed to a side which does not consider the biological and the scientific aspect of complexion either. So the reason why I'm saying that is because by and large I feel that scientifically we gravitate towards higher saturations, or fairer complexions in anything, right? It's just as much as when you're watching this video. This was completely unplanned, by the way. Shashin and I are wearing red. Yeah.
Yes.
So certain brands, for example, like McDonald's, you have Pizza Hut, certain food associated brands. It's psychological that they use certain colors because that attracts, number one, a certain type of person, and secondly, it invokes a certain emotion in a person. Hunger, in the case of red,
Yeah.
in the case of orange, yellow, these sort of colors. So
Yeah.
I think in the context of complexion, the same thing happens biologically. It's what we do innately. If you present two people, one who is dark and one who is fair, what essentially happens, whether you like it or not, it's not with any bias as such, but physiologically, by virtue of your psyche, you gravitate towards looking at the fairer person.
So
That's just...
So you, all right. So sorry to interrupt.
No, proceed.
So you mean to say that? So you mean to say that? You mean to say that it's not the fact that it's the fact that it's just a chemical reaction that happens in our brain that makes us gravitate towards fairer complexions and not darker complexions.
I'm saying that's where it starts from. So there's this wonderful research, and not just a research as such, one wonderful investigative report done by Vox many years ago, where it's on the development of Hollywood. It's on the development of Technicolor, right? About color theory and how.
I think that's it.
I think I sent it to you a few years ago. It's some time ago, Masha. So what they do is they show how in the past how color science in terms of cinema was basically thresholded. In other words, the benchmark of it was essentially a Caucasian white female. So it's a white female was the benchmark, and every color palette in cinema was based upon that benchmark. Which meant that if you had a person of darker complexion, if you had an African American, the correct representation of that color is not seen on screen.
And because of that, because of that particular template and the fact that didn't renew for a very long time, that there was so much of misconduct in terms of the way that darker complexions are portrayed happened just because of that singular template itself.
Correct. Yeah, right. So that's like the starting point of most of the issues, which even stem towards, quite ironically, representation in cinema. Because even network executives, directors preferred to use more fairer complexion individuals purely for the purposes of visually being more appealing, which comes back full circle to what I was suggesting to you. So now I feel in the context of even media, in the context of advertising, in the context of entertainment at large, whether we like it or not, and we touched on this when we spoke with Akash as well in a previous episode, where it ultimately boils down to the bottom line, Maza. It's rupees and cents, it's dollars and euros. So because of that, I feel you would want to have products or services and everything that's catered towards that more than anything else, and that is a science and a numbers game. Now, again, I must reiterate, I'm not suggesting that this is good or bad. I'm just saying it is what it is because of that. It's unfortunate that it's unfortunate that this is what is being harnessed in order to oppress people, which is wrong, absolutely. But we must also identify the fact that this is how it is, not by virtue of the fact that it's manifested by someone as how it should be, but rather it is what it is generally. We have to do better as a race, as human beings, to overcome that limitation. That's what it should be, not to suggest that it's being because of this, because of there's some underlying conspiracy to do that. I feel that is maybe going too far about it.
No, I disagree. I think this is this is a butterfly effect, like essentially, in the fact that we learn about butterfly effect being it's like a linchpin, right? Like one thing leads to another. So what I feel is the way that or at least the way that I looked at a lot of things growing up, I had the impression that because I grew up watching a lot of Western media, movies, TVs, cartoons, and everything, right? And what did it have? It had white people or white complexion. And if you remember very correctly, in the movies those days, right? And now it's changing slightly, but for the major part of it, if you look at entertainment, if you wanted to show a villain, it was always a darker complexion person. Not always, but whenever that they had to go for a villain or a bad person, a non-heroic person, a lazy person, they would always choose a darker complexion. But the hero of the story was always a white man, right? A white complexion dude, blonde hair, blue eyes. That was it, right? That was them saying that this is the perfect specimen. This is the perfect specimen, and everyone else is not. So growing up, I feel like while there might be a science to it, I feel strongly that it's all about the way that we were fed information in terms of what we associated with.
No,
Whether
that's
it's
true.
movies,
But then, Mazang, I'm sorry to interject, but then it doesn't really make sense then for that to be the case. In some way, shape, or form, in any country where the majority of people are not of fairer complexion, also, right? Even from back in the day, like even if you take Sri Lankan cinema from back in the
Yeah.
day, the presumption or like the placement, the person who's kept on a pedestal is still the fairer person. So it's
Yeah.
not something that is unique to a Western culture. It is just systemic. So if it is systemic in every country, then it has to go beyond simply one person considering this is what should be. Rather, it is what people feel it to be generally.
Correct.
So then wouldn't that be
That makes sense.
scientific?
No. There's a point to it, 100%. But at the same time, I feel like maybe that's because of that's because of the creatives at that time, right? Might have been might have been living in a culture where they understood that this was the case. Because remember, even the filmmakers in the olden days, the filmmakers in the beginning of our cinema industry, these people were not stemming from lower class or middle class people. It was people coming from high society who had
Yeah, access was
opportunities
not
to
there
actually
for a lower. Yeah,
reach
that's
out
true.
to
Yeah.
cinema, right? So they were well exposed to the Western media. So they understood that this was the case. This is how we should portray. Maybe fair means hero, and if you're not fair, it might not be the case, right? If you have less freckles in your face, that means hero or good person. If you have freckles in your face, you are a bad person essentially, right? That was the case. So I feel now I remember this is a example. I don't know if I should mention. Um, Probably 2-3 years ago, I think there was a commercial for a very prominent biscuit brand in Sri Lanka, and they came up with the commercial. It was really bad because the commercial was that a kapua was essentially
Yeah.
going to
Manchi,
a
right?
family.
This is a Manchi
right?
commercial. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Maliban. It was Maliban.
Maliban. Yeah. This episode is brought to you by
Maliban,
Manchi.
white chocolate bar. I don't understand,
Yeah.
but white chocolate bar.
The tag was the best part. The piece de resistance. Sudata Lollite. Yes, this is the commercial.
Little
Yeah.
low light, right? The commercial was pretty much essentially this guy going with his kapua to a family to see a bride, and when he first gets there, there's a woman who's seated in front of him across the room, and she has a darker complexion, and he tells the kapua that, is this
Yeah, I
the
remember.
person, like, she's a bit dark near the and the kapua is like, don't worry about it. There's a pair, there's another sister, and then the other sister comes, and she's obviously fair, and suddenly the guy lights up, and like the commercial literally shows the fact that fair means better and darker means not so good. And this is coming from a country of dark, like, complexion,
Yeah.
mainly, right? Which is a ridiculous misrepresentation. Think about it, if you are a kid growing up in Lanka, right? And you're just not that fair. How are you going to see that commercial, and what are you going to feel? You're going to feel shitty about yourself. Is this how it is? And this is systemic. This is systemically wrong, because that person is eventually going to buy a Fair and Lovely now. Because the Fair and Lovely commercial also shows the fact that, hey, you need to use our product. There's no reason for it, just for the fact that you need to become fair. There's no reason for it.
I get your premise. I get your argument. What you're suggesting is
Systematically,
that
you grow up in a culture
you're,
where you are rooted to say that like dark complexion means bad. And coming from
you are suggesting the same thing that they teach in like advertising 101, right? Where there is no problem, create a problem and then slide yourself into that, right? That's fine.
Yeah.
That's completely. I completely get that premise, Manon. But I think the problem with this argument, or at least the argument that we are having, is the fact that we are relegating this to the fact that it is an ecosystem created by a certain class of media pundits or professionals for the benefit of marketing, for control. I can say that they have subscribed to something that is innate in society. That's what I'm trying to get at. What I'm trying to get at is they are just reflecting on what has been societally the case. Like you started with that as well, right? You said that the when even in a familial context, if you have gotten darker, atiya kalu vela, inferring something negative, right? That has always been the case, yeah. That's how it is. And then the opposite is also true. Ane sudu vela, which is considered in a very positive. I get that, but then I feel, and I'm suggesting this in a very pragmatic and a very objective manner, because it needs to be put in that context. I think it stems beyond them. I'm just saying this is only one part of it, because it's a societal issue. And I think we spoke about this, and I don't want to dive deeper into it because that opens a separate can of worms. But even in a religious context, we do see in temples, we do see whenever there was historically a priest or a monk who is of darker complexion, the way in which he is portrayed in sculptures, in statuettes, is by being colored in blue, right?
Yes.
And this is seen everywhere in the country, right? So this is not just media. This is not just for the bottom line.
And
this is also something
is painted in black because
black. Exactly. So it's something that you want to disassociate with yourself, and all I'm suggesting is that stems more towards a scientific route. And maybe it's been perpetuated. It's been taken and packaged and sold in a different way now. And that's why we should try to overcome it. Overcome that limitation, that feeling that we have, because in a society it's wrong. But it doesn't mean that it's some grand scheme of trying to push that narrative. I'm just saying that narrative is being used to do something else.
Yeah. I think I understand. I think this is a good opportunity. I think there is an issue of representation, the way that complexion is represented on Sri Lankan TV. I'm not talking about any other country, just Sri Lankan TV, right? Being the majority of the country, being people of the country having not necessarily a fair complexion, it's bad to represent and ask for fair people all the time, right? And I feel strongly about that. And if you need to change the way we look at people and the way we look at it, we need to start from where you get your information and where you get your aspirations from: movies, teledramas, commercials, whatever, right? So I think there's some work that needs to be done there, and I feel like the reason that we think this way, and partly, is because of this. However, I think that there's some truth to what you're saying as well, especially with that example. And even the other example, I'm in design and I'm an art director, so I understand the importance of color and how it associates with emotions, especially. That there's a science to it, right? There's a reason why KFC, Pizza Hut, McDonald's use red color. It's to evoke hunger, excitement, right? So there is a science to it. So I agree with it. And I think, this is a good time for us to maybe think, because I'm very curious to know what everybody else thinks about this. What do you think? If people who watch this video, what do you think honestly? Is it a science or is it just media perpetuation? Let us know.